For today's video, I want to share with you a really useful multi-purpose beaded connector. You can use it alongside rosary linking or chainmail, such as these pieces from Fleur at Relax and Craft. But you can also use them to make a really cute pair of drop earrings. So I'm going to show you how to make that link. And I'll also show you how to make a little bit extra just to go down at the bottom of these earrings. So let's just pop both of those in side by side so you can see that they make quite a long, elegant drop. You don't have to add that bit on the bottom if you don't want to, but I'm going to show you both the link itself and that little billy bonus bit down at the bottom. For my link, I'm going to use a length of 18 gauge wire. I'm using silver, and this is 12 inches in length. Now you could use round nose pliers or multi-step bail makers. I've got a pair of 2-step bail makers, and this is a 4mm and a 6mm pin. You could use your round nose pliers and estimate those sizes if you wish to. The first thing I'm going to do is to make sure that that end is flush cut, and I'm going to make a circular form with the smaller side, that's the 4mm side of those bail makers, and I'm going to bring that around in a spiral until I have 2 turns of wire. So let me just get that all the way around. So it's spiraled round from the cut end once and then a second time, so it's like a spring rather than being layered around the outside of itself. What I'm going to do then is to pop that back into the form like so. Make sure that that's gone completely 2 turns, and I'm going to start drawing that wire around in the opposite direction, so it's as if you're making a figure of 8. I'm then going to remove the pin from the little double circle where we started, and I'm going to make 1.5 turns of wire. Now if you can see, the spiral of wire is coming away to what is left on the screen, so as I start wrapping around, I want to bring the tail of wire back in that same direction. So we've got the nexus point where it crosses over at the bottom, and I'm going to bring that section of wire back so that it can sit against, and I'll zoom in just here, it can sit against that double layer of wire. And I'm going to bring that all the way around, so this double spiral is only 1.5 turns. So you can see that I've got a double turn of wire at the beginning, and then I've got 1.5 turns. Now if it comes out of true, you can just pop your round form back in, give it a bit of a wiggle, and make sure that it sits really neatly. Now the reason for bringing the wire from the top down and then back up again is so that you get a flatter link. If you keep spiraling in the same direction, it'll start here on one end, and by the time you get to the other end, it'll be over here somewhere. So I'm always going to be switching back. So on that second circular form, now the first circular form is 4mm on the inside, 6mm on the second one. What I'm going to do is to put the small pin inside that circular form that we've just created, bring that wire all the way around. I'm going to hit the lights obviously, and because what I want to do is to make sure that I'm not growing this link in just one direction, I'm going to flip it back. So we've got the lower piece of wire is towards the bottom of the screen, bring the wire around, so I need to bring it closer to the top when I bring that all the way around again. It sounds complicated, but once I've made that circular form, I'm just going to push that down, and you'll see that we're keeping the link as flat as possible. So pop that one back inside to make sure that you get a nice rounded form, and bring the wire all the way around. So the middle link is also 1.5 turns. And we'd like to keep this in a straight line. If you imagine a straight line, let me just grab a piece of wire going through the centre. We're going to try and keep that as straight as possible. So that's a double loop, a 1.5 loop, a 1.5 loop. So we're going to go for another 1.5 loop. So I'm going to put the small side just inside that second loop and start spinning around, making sure that we don't lose that nice straight line. So you can see right now that curl is just a little bit too far over to the left. So I'm going to pop that plier back inside, and just draw it over slightly. It might be easier to show if I just pop it there and just draw that over a little bit, making sure that you don't lose that size. You can just push it a little bit further over and then draw the wire around. Now the wire that's coming away from that second loop is closer to the right hand side, or the underneath if you prefer. So when I bring the wire all the way back round again, we need it to be on the upper side, and in that way, let me just give that a quick squish. You'll see that we're keeping our link nice and flat. So pop that round form back inside, and again this is a 6mm round form. So we've got 3 loops that are of the 6mm on the inner diameter. So I'm just going to pop that form back in, make sure that everything is straight and make sure that everything is true. We're going to finish off now with a double loop on the end. So I've just started that off, but I have noticed that I need to bring it slightly further over so that it goes in that nice straight line. Once you've got that all lined up, we're going to finish off with another double loop. Hopefully you're able to see that the wire is on top of the stack at the moment. Let's just get that nice and solid. And what we want to do is to bring that wire around underneath. But this is going to be another double loop, taking us back to joining the rest of that connector. So just push that down into position, pop the pin back in, and then bring the tail around. I don't want to cut it until I've got that sitting exactly as I need it to be. So pop your plier back in, give it a bit of a rotate until it sits neatly, and then trim that away at the point it touches the rest of that connector. So you can bring in any of your flat facing pliers. I'm using my bent chain nose pliers, and I'm going to very gently just make sure that everything sits as flat as possible. So this is the reason why we're always switching the wire from going on top to going underneath. It's so that you end up with a nice flat springy connector rather than something that starts here and then gradually moves this way and then this way and then this way and then this way, and then when you lay it down it sits wonky. So we're taking a few extra moments to make sure that we've got a really nice flat strong connector. In order to set some gemmy goodness into this connector bar, we're going to use a piece of 0.4mm wire. I've cut an 8-inch length here of gold colour just because it's easier to see when it's on screen. What I'm going to do is to take around about 1 inch of one end, pop it through one of the holes, the smaller holes in the end, and what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that on the right hand side I have the singular piece of wire of the potential where the other side has 2. So if I pop 1 inch through that section just there, you might want to grab a pair of pliers for this next bit. I'm going to wrap up back inside that first large aperture, pull that wire all the way through. So what I've got is the long tail of wire is coming down over the middle of that connector bar, and I've got a single wrap going around into that small round space up at the top. So I'm going to push that wire end, the short end, again down through the same gap, making sure it goes to the right of that first wrap. Pull that nice and tight. So we've got 2 passes of wire on the joint between the small round and the first large round. I'm then going to bring the tail up inside that first large round, pull that nice and tight, and then wrap 3 times, and that's why it's important to have the single piece of wire on the right hand side. So I'm going to pull that up and through again, all the way around, and up and through one more time. So we've got those 3 passes of wire. If you pull that out of true, you can just squish that until it sits back in, and then bring that all the way around so that it sits inside that first large ring, and trim away the excess. What we're looking to have is the cut end on the inside of that circular form. Tighten up your wrapping by squishing across those little coils. And there we go. What we're going to do now is to set our first gem or first bead into position. So find the end of your finer gauge wire, add in your first bead and zip line that down until it sits into the centre of that first round form. So what we're going to do now is to push the tail end down through the middle of the 3 large rings. Get that to sit really neatly. And what we're doing here, as well as adding an encrustation of beads, is we're strengthening the link itself. So bring that tail up inside the first circular form again, making sure that that comes up neat and tidy. And then we can set the bead in the middle, push that to the centre, add in the next bead. Get that to slide down into position, typical of myself. Slide it down into position and keep it on top of the design the same way as you have done with that first bead, and then push the tail down inside the 3rd of the large loops, and then bring that tail up inside the 2nd of the large 3 loops. Pull that nice and tight without deforming our little triple link bar. And then we're going to add in the last bead of the design. Find the hole in your bead, my least favourite part of any demo. Should get some vocals very, very soon. And there it is. Sit that down into position, and then what we're going to do is to push down through. Pull that all the way back up. Now at this point we need to find which side has got the single bar of wire, because we're going to need to wrap in that general direction. So bring the tail up inside that last of the 3 large round forms, making sure that you're bringing that tail upwards towards the single side. If I flip that over, you'll see that's the double side, 2 passes of wire. This is the single side. So back down through the small connector end. Make sure that's nice and taut, and then finish off with 3 wraps around the single bar of that last large circular form. So that's 1 wrap, that's 2 wraps, pull that nice and tight, and we'll get that 3rd wrap into position. Make sure that that's good and strong, and what we're going to do is to, on the rear of the design, trim that away just a little past the top of that wire, and then push that tail so that it sits inside that circular form. And in that way you have got yourself your jewel encrusted or your bead encrusted triple connector bar. Now you can utilise this anywhere. In the example just here I have that showing just on the end of one of the pieces of chain, and in just one moment I'm going to show you how to turn those into a bonus pair of earrings. Now in order to create this little cute dropper so that I can turn my 3 bead bar connector into an earring, I'm going to take a 5-inch length of that 1mm 18 gauge wire. I'm going to use the little bit of gold that I have available. Now I'm going to use my memory wire finishing pliers for this. Again, you could use round nose pliers or multi-step bail makers. This is a 2mm and a 4mm bar, but I'm going to be using the 2mm bar. That's just a little way down your standard round nose pliers. So I'm going to create 3/4 of a round form to begin with, before switching to my bent chain nose pliers. Any flat facing pliers will do. I'm going to take that 3/4 of a round form and just push it into the tail of wire, and in that way you get a nice rounded centerpiece. I'm going to wind that wire around so that I've got 3 passes of wire starting off from that cut end, and the slower you move the better your spirals will be. So we've got 3 so far, and that's just 1 more to go, all the way back around to the point at which I started, which is just here. So from there we've got 1, 2 and 3. Going to give that a tiny squish. You could use a very gentle touch, or you could use coated pliers if you need to. I'm then going to use the side of my flat facing pliers, in this instance my bent chain nose pliers. and I'm going to push a sharp angled bend on that distance, which is probably about 6 millimeters. I'm then going to grip at that angle change and push the wire back down towards the rounded form. So just make sure that you've got a nice triangular bend up at the top, give it a squish to make it strong, and then what we're going to do is just warm through this tail of wire and draw that around the outside of that form. Nice and steady, nice and slowly, and you'll get a nice chase as if it's a fourth layer around that beautiful spiraled section. When you come to do the last little bit that comes towards that point, what we're going to do is pinch firmly and just draw that underneath slightly. Can you see it's just slightly underneath? And then when you bring that back up to the side, it should be nice and close. We're looking for that to just replicate the same shape. Once you're happy with that, again, give it a bit of a squish to make sure that you're happy with the form. What I'm going to do now is pinch very firmly and just draw that gently over the top of this teardrop shape before grabbing in my either round nose pliers or in this instance memory wire finishing pliers. And then I'm going to make a loop back in the opposite direction, draw that all the way around and then sit it centrally up at the top of your little design before trimming away that teeny tiny bit of leftover. So let's pop that in the scrap pot and then make sure that that sits down nice and flat. Give it a squish to set it nice and strong, and then all you need to do is connect it to your 3 bead bar connector with a jump ring. Here's one that I've just hurriedly made. Add that in with jump ring. Should probably show some professionalism, and grab a second pair of pliers to close that one up. Close that up, give it a squish, make sure it's nice and straight. You can take that just past and bring it back again, and in that way it gets it to sit nice and flat. And there you have your 3 bead bar connector turned into a little earring. So what I tend to do is flip these over so that they mirror each other, add another bar connector in here, and you've got another pair of earrings. Now we've got our earrings and we've got our single beaded bar connectors, I'm going to show you how you can create this into a 2-in-1 connector. So the basis of the design is very, very similar. You've got the end loop, you've got the 3 bays which are beaded, but at the far end you've got 2 loops, so you can bring 2 strands together. For this, again, I'm going to be using my 4 and 6 millimeter bail making pliers, and with that 12-inch length of 1 millimeter or 18 gauge wire, we're going to start in a very similar way to how we created the individual straight beaded bar connectors. Let's just make sure that that is flush cut. So what we're going to do is to go in with the smaller side, which is the 4 millimeter pin, and make sure that that's nice and smooth against that pin. Rotate that all the way around 1.5 times. So once I've got 1.5 turns, so I've got the cut end just here and the wire connected to the longer length is coming away just here, so it's opposite. What we're going to do now is turn that into a figure of 8 style. Let's just warm that wire through. It's a little bit chilly today. So you can see that we've got the wire on top at the moment. That's the underside. This is the on top sides. So when I bring that small pin in again, this is the 4 millimeter side again, just bring it slightly higher up. What we're going to do is to rotate the wire around, but bring it underneath so that they will sit smoothly side by side. So it's almost like a little infinity loop. Now, for the sake of strength, you can take that round for a second time, but I'm going to leave it as a single loop. Now the wire is coming away. We're going to have a look on the underside now. The wire is coming away from that figure of 8 or infinity style at quite a jaunty angle. And we're going to introduce the 6 millimeter side of these bail making pliers. So I'm going to allow that to bring the shape around, and because the wire is currently on top, I'm going to bring the tail of wire round underneath. And that's just so that we get that nice flat way of working. So if I just remove the pliers for a moment, this will now sit really nice and flat. I'm just going to push that by hand so that you've got that figure of 8 on the end, and then the next round form sits right in the middle, sort of nestling up against that join. So in much the same way as we created the standard straight bar connector, I'm going to bring that wire all the way over the top until it goes 1.5 times. So we've got our 1.5 times to begin with, 1 time on the second, and these are both 4mm. Then we move to the 6mm, and we've got that 1 turn and a half turn on top. So in exactly the same way as we generated the original bar, the straight bar connector, I'm now going to bring that wire around. Now, because the length of wire that's connected to the long end is underneath, that means when I bring the wire around, I'm going to try and get that on top. And in that way, we try to keep this form as flat as possible. So let's bring that all the way around. And now it's come to one side, so I'm just going to move that until it sits exactly how I want it to. And make sure that we generate the bar in that nice straight line that we did in the first one. Bring that all the way around. You will need to take the pins out so you can move that more easily. And now we've got the wire on top, so you can nestle those two parts together and they sit nice and flat. You might need to just bring that back into true if it's come off that straight line. You can pop that pin in and move it as you need to. I'm just going to put that in and shift that over ever so slightly, making sure that that's nice and tight around the pin. So I need my third little bay for the bead to sit in. So I'm going to put the smaller side in just to hold that in position, bring the wire all the way around. Now, because the continuation of wire goes over the top of this nexus point just here, I'll want to bring that tail round underneath, but I do want to make sure that that goes over so that my bar connector is nice and straight. So you can take a second just to get that sitting where you need it to sit. So let's bring that round underneath. Take the pin out as much as you need to, and again, just keep that nice and straight. Now, when you get to the far end, we'll finish off in exactly the same way as we did the original bar connector. Let's just get that nice and straightened up. And there we go. So I'll pop the big side in and bring the small side around to generate a double loop. Now let's have a look. The wire is underneath at this time. Pop that back into position, bring the tail around, and that needs to come over the top. So I'm going to go for 2 wraps again to make it nice and strong, all the way around. And you can take the pin out as many times as you need. Just make sure that that sits in a nice straight line. Bring that all the way over the top until you get 2 full turns of wire. So I'm just going to trim that away. And there you have the nuts and bolts of the connector, which will take you from 2 down into 1. So I'm going to show you now how to adapt the adding in of the beads. So we're going to start off in exactly the same way at the single loop end. Let's just push that all the way through by about 1 inch, and then I'm going to bring that tail up inside the first of the large loops. I'm pulling that up and taut on the side where there's only 1 pass of wire so that we can get lovely connection point. I'm going to wrap 3 times around that single piece. So that's a second turn and a third turn. I'm just going to flip over to the rear of that design, trim away the excess, and make sure that that cut end sits down neatly inside. Now the next part is exactly the same as we did for the main straight bar 1-into-1 connector. So I'll just add those beads in exactly the same way, and I'll join you back in just a second to show you how to finish off with the 1-into-2 connector. Now when you get to the end where you've got the 2 loops, what we're going to do is you see that there is a little gap just down between the last main bay where the bead sits and the first of those 2 smaller loops. What we're going to do is just snuggle the wire down in that gap to begin with, and then push that back up inside the last of those beaded bays. And that just sits the bead really neatly. What we're going to do now is to secure using this finer gauge wire everything together. So the first thing we're going to do is to choose the side of those two smaller loops which has the larger number of wraps. So I'm going to take that tail of wire, push that down inside the first of those two loops, and then I'm going to push it back up inside the beaded bay but on the far side of those wraps, and then I'm going to push that tail down inside the other of the small loops. So I've gone down inside the first of the small loops, back up inside that first bay, and then down inside the second loop, which has got the fewer wraps of wire. And what I might do, just for belt and braces, is bring that tail of wire up back inside the beaded bay, the last beaded bay. Pull that nice and tight, and then take that tail down inside the small loop with the fewer wraps of wire. And the reason we start off with just that little naked pass of wire just here, where there's just one piece, is that means that we can now wrap 3 times with the finer gauge wire around just a single piece of wire. And in that way, you're adding strength to the whole design and it won't pull apart if the piece of jewellery gets caught. So let's give that a second wrap, take the tail all the way around. There you've got your third wrap. Push that down into position, flip to the rear of the design, and we will trim away any excess. I've got that quite close so that I can just make sure that that sits down neatly and tidily. So on the front of the design, you've got the beads sitting proud in their little bays. At one end, you've got a really strong single loop. And then at the other end, everything is tied together and you've got these 2 loops to work with. I do hope that you have enjoyed today's multi-purpose beaded connector with that 1-to-1, 2-into-1 and those bonus earrings. Thanks so much for watching the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and share the videos. Leave me a comment down below if there's something you'd like to see. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.